It was supposed to be a joke for Sergeant Troy Bull Harlan and his crew of untouchables, a way to assert dominance over a drifter who wandered into the wrong town. They dragged a man out of his car, humiliated him, and tied him to a telephone pole like a scarecrow, laughing as they drove away to grab beers. They thought he was a nobody. They thought he was prey. They were wrong. They didn't know that the man shivering against that wood wasn't a drifter. He was Jack Bishop, a decorated federal agent, and he was their new chief of police. This is the story of the worst mistake in the history of the Hollow Creek Department and the brutal karma that followed. The heat in Hollow Creek didn't just sit on you, it owned you. It was a heavy, wet blanket of humidity that rose off the swamp and clung to the asphalt of Highway 61, distorting the air into shimmering waves of misery. Jack Bishop adjusted the rearview mirror of his 2011 Chevy Malibu. The car was a rust bucket, a deliberate choice. The paint was peeling on the hood. The muffler rattled with a rhythmic thrum, thrum, thrum. And the back seat was piled high with cardboard boxes and a stained blanket. To anyone watching, Jack looked like a man down on his luck, just another statistic moving from one failure to the next. He wore a faded gray t-shirt, jeans that had seen better decades, and a pair of work boots scuffed to hell. But under the passenger seat, locked in a biometric steel case, was a Glock 19 Gen 5 and a badge that carried the weight of 20 years in special operations and internal affairs. Jack wasn't just passing through. He was the cure. The mayor of Hollow Creek, a desperate man named Gerald P. Holloway, had reached out to the state capitol. The email was short, frantic, and encrypted. "I am losing my town," Holloway had written. "Corruption isn't the word. It's an occupation. I need a ghost, someone they don't see coming." Jack was the ghost. He took the curve past the Welcome to Hollow Creek, population 4,200 sign. The sign was riddled with bullet holes, a local pastime. He kept his speed exactly at the limit. He wasn't looking for trouble yet. He wanted to see the town breathe before he started choking it. He passed the main street strip, a dying diner called Loretta's, a boarded-up hardware store, and 3 bail bond offices clustered like vultures around the courthouse. And then he saw it. Blue lights flashed in his rear view. Jack's hands tightened on the wheel for a fraction of a second before relaxing. He checked his speedometer. His taillights were working. His registration was current, albeit under the alias Jack King. "Here we go," he muttered, his voice a low rumble. He pulled over onto the gravel shoulder, the dust clouds swallowing the back of the Malibu. In the side mirror, he watched the cruiser door open. It was a Dodge Charger, aggressive and blacked out. The officer who stepped out looked like he'd been carved out of granite and bad intentions. This was Sergeant Troy Bull Harlan. Jack knew the file on Harlan by heart. 6'4", 250 pounds. Former linebacker for the local high school. 3 excessive force complaints in the last year, all dismissed by the previous chief. Harlan was the alpha dog of the department, the kind of cop who didn't enforce the law. He decided what the law was. Harlan didn't approach the window immediately. He stood by the trunk of the Malibu, hand resting on his holster, tapping the taillight. A power move, making the driver sweat. Jack rolled down the window. He didn't look back. He kept his hands at 10 and 2. Finally, Harlan sauntered up. He wasn't wearing his hat. His sunglasses were mirrored, reflecting Jack's calm face. He chewed on a toothpick like it was a cigar. "License and registration," Harlan said. He didn't ask. He demanded. "Afternoon, officer," Jack said, keeping his voice submissive, quiet. He reached slowly for the glove box. I didn't ask for the weather report. Boy, I asked for the plastic. Jack paused. The slur was casual, practiced. It hung in the hot air between them. Jack handed over the ID for Jack King. Harlan snatched it, looking at the photo, then at Jack, then back at the photo. Jack King. You ain't from around here, Jack. Just passing through, sir. Heading to Jackson, looking for work. Work? Harlan laughed, a dry, humorless sound. He leaned in closer, invading the window space. The smell of stale coffee and chewing tobacco wafted in. We got laws in Hollow Creek about vagrancy. We don't like trash blowing onto our streets. I have money for gas and a motel, officer. I'm not vagrant. Harlan's smile vanished. Get out of the car, sir. I haven't committed a crime. I was going the limit, Jack said. Harlan unclipped the safety strap on his holster, the click echoing loudly in the silence of the afternoon. Get out of the car. Jack calculated the distance. He could disarm Harlan in an instant. He could break Harlan's wrist and slam his face into the B-pillar before the sergeant knew the world had turned upside down. But that wasn't the mission. The mission was to see how deep the rot went. Jack opened the door and stepped out. 2 more cruisers pulled up within moments. They screeched to a halt, boxing the Malibu in. Out of the first car stepped Deputy Kyle Briggs, a wiry, nervous-looking man with shifting eyes, and Officer Dean Stapleton, a heavy-set guy who looked like he followed Harlan around hoping for scraps. What we got, Sarge? Briggs asked, his hand hovering near his taser. We got a smart mouth, Harlan said, tossing Jack's ID onto the dusty ground. Mr. King here thinks he knows the law. Jack stood by his car, legs spread, hands on the hood. He didn't flinch as Stapleton kicked his legs further apart, harder than necessary. Search the car, Harlan ordered. I don't consent to a search, Jack said calmly. You need a warrant or probable cause. Harlan walked up to Jack, close enough that his nose almost touched Jack's ear. Probable cause. I smell weed. Strong odor. Don't you smell it, Briggs? Briggs snickered. Oh, yeah. Sarge reeks of it. Probably a whole brick in there. There were no drugs in the car. Jack didn't even smoke. It was the oldest trick in the dirty cop playbook. They tore the Malibu apart. They ripped the cardboard boxes open, dumping clothes and books onto the gravel. They slashed the upholstery of the seats with a pocket knife. They threw his spare tire into the ditch. When they found nothing but old clothes and a few mechanics' tools, Harlan's frustration grew. He hated being wrong. He hated that Jack wasn't begging. Most drifters would be crying by now, pleading for mercy. Jack just watched, his eyes dark and unreadable. He's giving me the look, boys, Harlan said, taking off his sunglasses. His eyes were pale blue and cold. I don't like the look. Maybe he needs to cool off, Stapleton suggested, grinning. It's a hot day. Harlan looked at the telephone pole a few yards away. It was an old wooden utility pole coated in tar and creosote sitting in a patch of tall, dry weeds. Cuff him, Harlan ordered. Sir, this is unnecessary, Jack said, his voice hardening slightly. Resisting arrest, Harlan shouted, slamming Jack's head against the roof of the car. The impact was sharp. A burst of white light in Jack's vision. They swarmed him. Jack let them. He let them twist his arms behind his back, the metal cuffs biting into his wrists. He let them drag him through the ditch, his boots scraping the mud. They pushed him against the utility pole. Briggs ran a second pair of cuffs through the first, looping them around a rusted metal climbing spike on the pole. Then, just for good measure, Stapleton grabbed a roll of yellow police line do not cross tape from his trunk. They wrapped him. They wound the plastic tape around his chest. his legs, banding him tight to the wood. The creosote burned his skin where his shirt had pulled up. The sun beat down on his exposed head. "There," Harlan said, stepping back and admiring his handiwork. He took out his phone and snapped a picture. The new town mascot. "You guys can't do this," Jack said. He wasn't acting anymore. The anger was real, a cold furnace in his gut. "This is a felony. Deprivation of rights under color of law." Harlan laughed, a deep belly laugh. He walked over and patted Jack on the cheek, a hard, stinging slap masquerading as a pat boy in Hollow Creek. "I am the color of the law. You sit there and think about your attitude. We'll come back and cut you down when the shift changes. Maybe if we remember. Or maybe the mosquitoes will carry him off." Briggs giggled. "Let's go, boys. Drinks are on me at the wheelhouse," Harlan announced. They got back in their cruisers. The engines roared. Gravel sprayed up, peppering Jack's legs. They drove off, leaving a cloud of dust and silence. Jack stood there, bound to a pole on the side of Highway 61. The sun was merciless. Sweat trickled into his eyes. His arms ached from the angle of the cuffs. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, centering himself. He wasn't a victim. He was a hunter who had just stepped into the trap to test the spring. "Sergeant Troy Bull Harlan," Jack whispered to the empty road. "Enjoy that beer. It's going to be your last." He flexed his wrists, testing the tensile strength of the chain link on the cuffs. Standard issue. Smith & Wesson Model 100s. He knew the torque limits, but he didn't need to break them. He heard the sound of an engine approaching. A beat-up Ford F-150, older than his Malibu, slowed down. It stopped. An old man, skin like leather and hair like white steel wool, leaned out of the window. He looked at Jack, then looked up the road where the cops had gone. "They get you for breathing while black, son?" the old man asked. His voice was raspy, filled with years of smoke and resignation. "Something like that," Jack replied. "You got a knife?" The old man parked and stepped out. He walked with a limp, using a cane. He approached cautiously. "I cut you down. They might come for me next." "That was Harlan, wasn't it?" "It was," Jack said. "And if you cut me down, I promise you Harlan won't be coming for anyone ever again." The old man paused. He looked into Jack's eyes. He saw something there that wasn't fear. It was authority. He pulled a buck knife from his belt. "Name's Earl. Hold still." As Earl sawed through the yellow tape, Jack's mind was already back at the station. He had seen the unit numbers. He had the faces. And in his pocket, which they hadn't searched thoroughly enough, was a small digital audio recorder that had been running since the moment the blue lights flashed. The tape fell away. Earl worked on the position of the cuffs, but couldn't unlock them. "I can't get the iron off. Just get me to my car," Jack said. "I have a key." Jack wasn't going to the hospital. He wasn't going to the state police. He was going to the police station. The shift change meeting and roll call was about to begin. The mayor had told him that was when the entire department would be in the briefing room. Jack looked at his reflection in the Malibu's window. He was dirty. He was sweating. He had a bruise forming on his forehead. He looked like a wreck. Perfect, he thought. He turned to Earl. "Earl, you drive. Take me to the station. Right to the front door." "You got a death wish?" Earl asked, eyes wide. "No," Jack said, climbing into the passenger seat of his own car as Earl took the wheel. "I've got a job to do." The Hollow Creek Police Station was a concrete block of a building that smelled of floor wax and stale rebellion. Inside the briefing room, the atmosphere was raucous. 20 officers sat in folding chairs. The air was thick with testosterone and laughter. Sergeant Troy Bull Harlan was holding court at the front of the room, leaning against the podium where the chief usually stood. The chief's spot had been empty since the last one had died of a sudden heart attack that everyone knew was stress-induced or worse. And then Harlan shouted, mimicking Jack's voice. He says, "I know my rights." The room erupted in laughter. Briggs wiped a tear from his eye. "And you should have seen him when we wrapped him up. Looked like a Christmas present nobody wanted." Harlan pulled up the photo on his phone and held it up. Posted this to the group chat. Caption, "Lost and found. Claim at the dump." More laughter. High fives were exchanged. It was a locker room, not a law enforcement agency. All right, settle down," Harlan said, grinning. "Mayor said the new chief is supposed to be here sometime this week. Some affirmative action hire from out of state. Probably never worked a real street in his life. We give him the Hollow Creek welcome. Yeah, we show him how things work down here." "Damn straight, Troy," Officer Stapleton yelled. The door to the briefing room slammed open. It wasn't a normal opening. It was a violent kick that sent the heavy oak door banging against the wall with a crack like a gunshot. The laughter died instantly. 20 heads whipped around. Standing in the doorway was Jack Bishop. He looked deranged. His shirt was torn. He was covered in dust and bits of yellow police tape. The handcuffs were still dangling from his left wrist. He had unlocked one side but left the bracelet on, a hanging metal reminder. But it was his eyes that froze the room. They weren't the eyes of the victim they had left on the pole. They were the eyes of a predator who had just kicked in the door of the den. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Harlan squinted, his brain struggling to process the image. "The hell? How did you get loose? You got a lot of nerve coming here, boy. You want round two?" Harlan's hand dropped to his baton. Jack didn't speak. He walked into the room. He didn't walk like a drifter. He walked with a tactical precision, his boots thudding heavy on the linoleum. He walked straight past the rows of stunned officers. He walked right up to the podium where Harlan was leaning. Harlan stood up to his full height, puffing his chest out. I said, "You lost or are you stupid?" Jack stopped 6 inches from Harlan. The smell of the swamp and sweat rolled off him. "You're in my spot," Jack said. His voice was low, clear, and terrifyingly calm. Harlan blinked. "Excuse me?" Jack reached into his back pocket. Every cop in the room tensed, hands twitching toward guns. Jack pulled out a leather wallet. He flipped it open. The gold badge of the chief of police gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Next to it was his federal ID card. "I said," Jack repeated, his voice rising just enough to echo off the back wall. "You are in my spot, Sergeant." The color drained from Troy Bull Harlan's face so fast it looked like he'd been hooked up to a vacuum. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Briggs in the second row dropped his soda can. It clattered loudly, spinning on the floor. The only sound in a room where 20 careers were flashing before 20 pairs of eyes. "Chief," Harlan whispered, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. "Chief Jack Bishop," Jack corrected, "and I am the highest-ranking officer in this building." Jack turned to the room. He scanned every face. He memorized them. "I was told this department had a discipline problem," Jack said, addressing the room, ignoring Harlan, who was now trembling beside him. "I decided to see for myself, and what I found." He looked down at the handcuffs still hanging from his wrist. He held his arm up, the metal clinking. "What I found was a gang." He turned back to Harlan. The sergeant was shrinking, his bravado evaporating into sheer, unadulterated panic. "Harlan," Jack said softly, "you have the right to remain silent." Harlan's eyes went wide. "Chief, wait. It was a joke. We didn't know." "You have the right to remain silent," Jack roared, the sound hitting Harlan like a physical blow. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." "Officer Briggs." Briggs jumped, nearly falling out of his chair. "Yes, sir." "Get up here," Jack commanded. "Cuff your sergeant. Use his own cuffs, the ones he likes to use on innocent civilians." I can't," Briggs stammered, looking at Harlan. "Do it, or you turn in your badge right now and join him in the cell," Jack said. Briggs scrambled up. With shaking hands, he pulled Harlan's arms behind his back. Harlan didn't fight. He was in shock. The predator had become the prey in the span of moments. As the cuffs clicked, the same sound Jack had heard on the highway, Jack leaned in close to Harlan's ear. "You left me on a pole to rot, Troy," Jack whispered. "Now watch me burn your kingdom to the ground." The silence in the briefing room was shattered by the metallic click-click-click of the ratchet on the handcuffs. Sergeant Troy Bull Harlan, the man who had terrorized Highway 61 for a decade, was now bent over his own podium, cheek pressed against the cheap wood laminate. "You have the right to an attorney," Jack recited, his voice devoid of emotion. "If you cannot afford one, the court will appoint one for you. Do you understand these rights as I have read them to you?" Harlan was hyperventilating. You can't do this. I'm the senior officer. You're assaulting a police officer." "No," Jack said, stepping back and dusting off his shirt. "I'm arresting a criminal who happens to be wearing a costume." Jack turned his gaze to the rest of the room. 18 other officers sat frozen. Some had their hands near their holsters. Others were visibly shaking. They were witnessing a coup, a sudden violent shift in the gravitational pull of their world. "Everyone, hands on the tables, palms flat," Jack commanded. Now, hesitantly, 18 pairs of hands slapped onto the laminate tables. "Officer Briggs," Jack said to the trembling deputy who had just cuffed his boss, "take his weapon, take his badge. Put them on the podium." Briggs, pale and sweating profusely, unbuckled Harlan's gun belt. The heavy equipment hit the floor with a thud. He unpinned the silver shield from Harlan's shirt. "Now," Jack said, addressing the room, "I know Sergeant Harlan didn't work alone. I know there are 3 shifts. I know there's a slush fund. I know about the tolls you collect from out-of-towners. We just follow orders, Chief." Officer Stapleton, the one who had wrapped the tape, blurted out, "Harlan runs the show. We just do what we're told." Jack walked over to Stapleton. He leaned down, staring into the man's eyes. "The Nuremberg defense. I was just following orders. That didn't work for the Nazis, Stapleton, and it isn't going to work for you." Jack pulled out his phone. He dialed a single number. "Go," he said into the receiver. Outside, the wail of sirens began. Not the local sirens of Hollow Creek, but the distinct deeper warble of state troopers. Jack had brought the cavalry. "While I was enjoying the view from that telephone pole," Jack said, pacing the front of the room, "I had plenty of time to think. And while I was driving into town, my team was setting up a perimeter. You boys thought you were untouchable in your little Delta kingdom. You forgot that Mississippi is a big state." The front doors of the station burst open again. This time, it wasn't a lone man in dirty clothes. It was a tactical team from the Mississippi State Police, followed by 2 men in suits, FBI field agents. "Secure the building," a trooper shouted. "Nobody leaves." Phones on the tables. The room dissolved into chaos, but it was controlled chaos. The Hollow Creek officers were patted down, their weapons seized. They were herded into the corner like cattle. Jack walked over to Harlan, who was now being hauled up by 2 state troopers. "Harlan," Jack said, "you're going to be the first guest in your newly renovated jail cells. I want you to pay close attention to the amenities. You're going to be there a long time. My lawyer will have me out in an hour." Harlan spat, some of his arrogance returning now that the immediate shock was wearing off. "You don't know who I know. You don't know Judge Kane. He'll have your badge for this." Jack smiled, a cold, predatory baring of teeth. "Judge Kane. The same Judge Kane who signed the warrants for the raid on your house that's happening right now. We showed him the video, Harlan. The video of you taping a federal agent to a pole. He flipped on you faster than a cheap coin." Harlan's knees buckled. "Get him out of my sight," Jack ordered as they dragged Harlan away, his boots dragging on the floor. Jack turned to the remaining officers. "I'm giving you one chance," Jack announced. "One. If you have dirt, if you have skimming, if you have planted evidence, you come to my office in the next hour, and you confess. You might keep your pension. You might just get fired instead of prison. But if you make me find it, I will bury you under the jail." He looked at Briggs and Stapleton. "Except you two," Jack said, pointing. "You two are already done. Book them." The state troopers moved in. Jack Bishop walked into the chief's office, a dusty room with a dead fern in the corner and a desk covered in paperwork. He sat down in the leather chair. It squeaked. He looked at the handcuffs still dangling from his left wrist. He found the key in his pocket, the one he had retrieved from the hidden compartment in his Malibu steering column, and unlocked the cuff. He dropped the metal bracelet onto the desk. It landed with a heavy clack. "Phase 1 complete," he whispered. But he knew this was just the beginning. Harlan was a thug, a bully. But bullies don't operate this openly unless someone is protecting them. Someone with money. Someone with power. Jack opened the top drawer of the desk. It was empty except for a single frantic note left by the previous chief. "Don't trust the water company." Jack frowned. The water company? He picked up the phone. "Get me the file on Hollow Creek Municipal Water and Power, and get me the file on Mayor Holloway." The real war was just starting. The sun had set over Hollow Creek, but the heat hadn't broken. Inside the station, the air conditioning was humming, struggling to keep up with the bodies and the tension. Jack had converted the conference room into a command center. The walls were covered in butcher paper, charting the connections of the department. It was a spider web of graft. Traffic stops leading to cash bond payments that disappeared. Seized vehicles sold at auction to officers' cousins for pennies. Evidence lockers missing pounds of narcotics. But the biggest red flag was a recurring name in the files. Delta Holdings, LLC. Every time there was a major incident, a land dispute, a zoning issue, a mysterious fire, Delta Holdings was there to buy the property for cheap. And who provided the security for Delta Holdings? Off-duty Hollow Creek officers paid triple overtime. Chief. A young FBI agent named Special Agent Brooks knocked on the doorframe. "You need to see this." We cracked Harlan's phone. Jack rubbed his eyes. "What do you have?" "Text messages, hundreds of them, mostly to a burner phone. But we traced the IP. They're communicating with a guy named Patrick Graves." Jack froze. "Patrick Graves, the attorney?" "The same. The defender of the South. The guy who has billboards on every highway from here to Texas." Jack knew the name. Patrick Graves was a high-powered defense attorney based in Memphis, known for getting high-profile criminals off on technicalities. He was smooth, expensive, and connected. If Harlan was his client or his employee, this was going to be harder than Jack thought. "Bring Harlan to interrogation 1, Jack said, and set up the camera. The interrogation room was cold. Harlan sat handcuffed to the table, still in his uniform pants, but his shirt had been taken as evidence. He looked smaller without the badge. Jack walked in, carrying a thick file folder. He didn't sit. He stood in the corner in the shadows. "Comfortable, Troy?" Jack asked. "I want my lawyer." Harlan sneered. "I called Patrick Graves. He's on his way." "I know," Jack said. "I'm counting on it." Jack tossed a photo onto the table. It was a picture of a 9-year-old kid, battered and bruised, sitting in a holding cell. "Who is that?" Jack asked. "I don't know. Some punk we picked up recently for vagrancy." "His name was Michael Hayes," Jack said. "He was a college student passing through on his way to Florida. You booked him for resisting. He died in this cell soon after. Coroner said heart failure. He was 19. Troy, 19-year-olds don't have heart failure." Harlan looked away. "Accidents happen. Kid was probably on something. We exhumed the body this morning." Jack dropped the bomb quietly. "The autopsy is being redone by the state medical examiner in Jackson. But I don't need the results to know you beat him to death." Harlan stayed silent, his jaw clenching. "We found the trophy room, Troy," Jack continued. "In your garage, the box of driver's licenses, the watches. Michael's watch was in there. A nice tag here. You kept it." Harlan's face went gray. Possession of stolen property was one thing. Taking a trophy from a homicide victim was a death sentence. That was planted. Harlan stammered. "By who?" "The Tooth Fairy." Jack leaned into the light. "I have you, Troy. I have you for murder, too. Kidnapping, racketeering, civil rights violations. You're looking at life without parole in Parchman. You know what they do to cops in Parchman?" Harlan began to shake. Real fear, the kind that liquefies the bowels, set in. "Unless," Jack trailed off. "Unless what?" Harlan whispered. "Unless you give me the architect. You're dumb, Troy. You're mean. But you're not the one who set up the shell companies. You didn't launder the money through the water company. Who is Patrick Graves working for?" Before Harlan could answer, the door to the interrogation room swung open. A man in a 3-piece seersucker suit walked in. He smelled of expensive cologne and old money. He had silver hair combed to perfection and a briefcase made of alligator skin. "That will be all, Chief Bishop," the man said, his voice like molasses. "Patrick Graves," Jack said, not moving. "You made good time. I have a helicopter." Graves smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "And you are harassing my client. Sergeant Harlan has invoked his right to counsel. You are to cease questioning immediately." Graves placed a document on the table. "This is a writ of habeas corpus signed by Judge William Kane of the Fourth Circuit. You are to release Sergeant Harlan into my custody immediately pending a bail hearing." Jack looked at the paper. It was legit. Judge Kane was a known heavy hitter, a man with deep pockets and shallow morals. "You work fast," Jack said. "I work efficiently," Graves countered. "Now unlock him or I will have you held in contempt." Jack looked at Harlan. Harlan was grinning now, looking at Graves like he was a savior. "You see, boy." Harlan laughed. "I told you. You can't touch me." Jack picked up the keys. He walked over to Harlan. He leaned down close to Harlan's ear. "This isn't over, Troy. It's just getting interesting. Jack unlocked the cuffs. Harlan rubbed his wrists, standing up and puffing his chest out again. "I'll have your badge for this, Bishop," Harlan said. "I'll have you sweeping floors." "Come, Troy," Graves said, opening the door. "We have business to discuss. And, Chief, I'd be careful where I step in this town. The swamp has a way of swallowing people who ask too many questions." Jack watched them leave. He didn't stop them. Agent Brooks walked in looking furious. "You let him go." "We have him for the assault on me," Jack said. "But Graves is right. If we arrest him now, Kane will bail him out, and the evidence will disappear. We need to catch them in the act." "What act?" "The water company," Jack said. Harlan mentioned the water company in his texts. "The reservoir is full. That's the code." Jack walked back to the command center. "Get me a map of the Hollow Creek Reservoir," Jack ordered. "And get me a diver." "What are we looking for?" Brooks asked. "I don't know," Jack admitted. "But whatever it is, it's worth killing for, and it's worth buying a police department to protect." The phone on Jack's desk rang. It was an unlisted number. Jack picked it up. "Bishop." A distorted voice on the other end spoke. "You cut down the scarecrow, Chief. Now the crows are coming. Leave town tonight or you won't leave at all." The line went dead. Jack hung up the phone. He smiled. "They're scared," he told the room. "Good. In the dark of the Delta swamp is a living thing. The air is thick with the screech of cicadas and the splash of gators sliding into the murk. But tonight, the most dangerous thing in the swamp wasn't a reptile. It was a convoy of 3 unmarked SUVs running dark, their headlights off, navigating by night vision goggles. Jack Bishop sat in the lead vehicle. Beside him was Special Agent Brooks. In the back were 2 state police divers already suited up in dry suits. "We're 2 miles out from the intake pipes," Brooks whispered, checking the GPS. "Thermal shows 3 heat signatures at the pump house. They're waiting." "They aren't waiting," Jack said, checking the slide on his Glock. "They're working." Harlan's panic made them sloppy. "They're trying to move the evidence before sunrise." The evidence wasn't just drugs or money. Jack's team had uncovered the truth about Delta Holdings. It was a shell company for a massive chemical disposal operation. For years, a syndicate had been trucking toxic industrial runoff, stuff filled with heavy metals and carcinogens from factories in Texas, and dumping it directly into the Hollow Creek Reservoir. They were poisoning the town for profit. The real private name that had unlocked the puzzle wasn't a criminal, but a victim. In the files, Jack had found a suppressed report from a private environmental inspector named Linda Whitaker. She had died in a single-car accident on Highway 61 sometime earlier. Her notes, buried in the digital archives of the water department, mentioned the midnight run. "We move on foot from here," Jack ordered. They parked the SUVs in the brush. The team moved silently through the sawgrass. The smell of rot was overwhelming. Not just nature, but the sharp, acrid sting of chemicals ahead. The pump house loomed. Floodlights cut through the fog. A large tanker truck was backed up to the water's edge. Men were rolling heavy blue barrels down a ramp and into the water. And there, overseeing the operation, was Patrick Graves, the lawyer, stripped of his suit jacket, shouting orders. Next to him, holding a shotgun, was Sergeant Troy Bull Harlan. "Faster, you idiots," Harlan yelled, kicking a barrel. "The feds are crawling all over town. We need this gone, and it's gonna float if you don't puncture it right," Graves shouted back. "Do I have to do everything myself?" Jack signaled the team. Flank left, flank right. He watched through the tall grass. This was it. The moment the monster revealed its face. They weren't just corrupt cops. They were mass murderers. Every cancer diagnosis in Hollow Creek, every sick child, every unexplained death. It was all right here in these blue barrels. Harlan laughed, a sound that carried over the water. Don't worry about Bishop. Judge Kane signed a warrant for his arrest an hour ago. We'll claim he was corrupt. We'll say he was the one dumping it. Who are they gonna believe? A new guy or the town hero? You're no hero, Troy, Jack whispered to himself. He stood up. He didn't shout. He didn't scream. He simply racked the slide of his weapon. The sound was distinct. Clack, clack. Harlan froze. He spun around, raising the shotgun. Federal agents, Brooks screamed, his voice booming. Drop the weapons. Get on the ground. Chaos erupted. The workers loading the barrels scrambled, diving into the water or running into the woods. Graves, the slick lawyer, panicked. He tried to run for his Mercedes parked by the pump house. Don't let him leave, Jack shouted. Harlan didn't run. He leveled the shotgun at Jack. You should have stayed on the pole, boy. Harlan roared. Boom! The shotgun blast shredded the sawgrass to Jack's left. Jack dropped and rolled to, firing 2 controlled shots. Pop, pop. Harlan grunted, his shoulder jerking back as a bullet grazed his tactical vest. He scrambled for cover behind the tanker truck. Suppressing fire, Brooks yelled. The state troopers opened up, peppering the truck with rounds. Sparks flew. Harlan, give it up, Jack yelled from behind a cypress tree. Graves is already in cuffs. It's over. It ain't over until I say it's over. Harlan screamed. He popped up, firing wildly. Jack saw his opening. He didn't shoot to kill. He shot to dismantle. He aimed for the truck's tires. Bam. Bam. The truck listed to the side. Then he aimed for the hydraulic line of the ramp. Ping. The heavy metal ramp collapsed. Harlan, using it for cover, lost his balance. He stumbled backward, his boots slipping on the chemical slime coating the dock. With a flailing scream, Sergeant Troy Bull Harlan fell backward into the dark, churning water of the reservoir, right next to the leaking barrels of toxic sludge he had spent years protecting. He surfaced, sputtering, coughing as the chemical water filled his mouth. He tried to grab the dock, but his heavy vest weighed him down. Help! Help me! Harlan shrieked, thrashing. I can't swim in this. It burns. It burns. Jack holstered his weapon. He walked to the edge of the dock. He looked down at the man who had tied him to a pole. Harlan looked up, eyes wide with terror, skin already reddening from the potent chemicals. Bishop, please pull me out. Jack stared at him for a long, silent moment. The hard karma had arrived. The very poison Harlan had forced on the town was now swallowing him whole. Throw him a line, Jack said to Brooks. We need him alive for the trial. Brooks threw a rope. Harlan grabbed it, sobbing, broken. No longer the bull of Hollow Creek, just a scared man in a pool of his own making. The federal courthouse in Jackson. The wheels of justice usually turn slowly, grinding quietly in the background of American life. But in the case of United States versus Troy Harlan and Company, the wheels had come off, caught fire, and were rolling downhill at breakneck speed. The atmosphere inside courtroom 4B was suffocating. It wasn't the heat. The heavy industrial air conditioning was blasting a chill that made the spectators shiver, but the sheer weight of hatred in the room. The gallery was packed shoulder to shoulder. There were mothers from the stretches locals called Cancer Alley, clutching photos of children they had lost to the toxic water. There were men who had been beaten in holding cells, their scars hidden under Sunday best suits. And in the front row, Sitting stoically like a statue carved from obsidian was Chief Jack Bishop. He wore his dress blues. The gold stars on his collar caught the fluorescent light. He didn't look at the cameras. He looked at the defense table. Sitting there, shackled to the floor by a three-point restraint system, was the man formerly known as the Bull. Sergeant Troy Bull Harlan looked less like a bull and more like a flayed animal. The chemical burns from his plunge into the reservoir had left angry red keloid scars creeping up the right side of his neck and face. His hair, once thick and styled with arrogance, was thinning and patchy. He had lost 60 pounds in pretrial confinement. The orange jumpsuit hung off him like a tent. Beside him sat Patrick Graves. The high-powered attorney had been disbarred recently. He was now just another co-defendant, his silver tongue silenced by a mountain of evidence that Jack Bishop had meticulously excavated. The presiding judge was the Honorable Judge Edward Hangman Reynolds. Reynolds was a legend in Mississippi law, a man who didn't believe in rehabilitation for those who abused the public trust. He believed in excision. He adjusted his glasses, looking down at the defense table with the cold detachment of a mortician. "Mr. Harlan." Judge Reynolds' voice was a low rumble that vibrated through the mahogany benches. "In my 30 years on the bench, I have seen drug dealers, murderers, and rapists. I've looked into the eyes of men who killed for $5. The courtroom was so silent you could hear the hum of the electric lights. But I have never," Reynolds continued, leaning forward, "seen a betrayal of the public trust as absolute and as vile as this. You didn't just break the law. You wore the law as a mask while you poisoned a town." Harlan trembled. He tried to stand, but the chains clanked loudly, pulling him back down. "Your Honor, I was following orders. It was the system. I have a family." "You had a family, Mr. Harlan," Reynolds corrected sharply. "Your wife filed for divorce the morning the indictment was unsealed. Your children have legally changed their last names. You are alone." The words hit Harlan harder than any baton. He slumped in his chair, a sob catching in his throat. The sentencing phase had lasted several days. Jack had taken the stand on the first day. He hadn't raised his voice. He had simply played the audio from his recorder. The sound of Harlan laughing as he taped a human being to a telephone pole. He played the video of the pump house, the toxic sludge pouring into the water supply. The jury had deliberated quickly. "Please rise for sentencing," the bailiff announced. Patrick Graves stood up, shaking. Harlan had to be hauled up by 2 U.S. Marshals. Patrick Graves. The judge read from a thick document. "For the charges of racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder, you are sentenced to 40 years in federal prison." Graves closed his eyes. His life of luxury was over. He would die in a concrete box. Troy Harlan. The judge turned his gaze to the former sergeant. Harlan looked up, tears streaming down his scarred face. "Please, protective custody." "Your Honor, I was a cop. If you put me in general population, they'll kill me." "You can't do that. It's a death sentence." Judge Reynolds paused. He took off his glasses and cleaned them slowly with a silk cloth. "The Bureau of Prisons will determine your housing assignment, Mr. Harlan. However, given the nature of your crimes against the very citizens you swore to protect, I am recommending that you serve your time at a maximum security facility capable of handling high-risk offenders." The judge put his glasses back on. "I sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole plus 120 years consecutive." The gavel came down. Bang. It sounded like a gunshot. Pandemonium erupted in the gallery. Cheers, tears, and shouts of justice filled the air. Jack didn't cheer. He stood up slowly, buttoning his jacket. As the marshals began to drag Harlan away, Jack moved. He didn't walk to the exit. He walked to the railing that separated the free world from the condemned. "Harlan," Jack said. "Troy." Harlan stopped. He looked at the man he had tormented on Highway 61. He saw the chief's badge. He saw the man he should have feared. "Come here," Jack said softly. Harlan shuffled to the railing, dragged by the marshals who paused, respecting the chief. "You wanted to know about protective custody?" Jack said, his voice low enough that only Harlan could hear. "You have to help me, Bishop," Harlan begged, snot running down his nose. "I know we had our differences, but you're blue. I'm blue. You can't let them put me in with the animals. I'll do anything. I have info on other parishes. I can snitch." Jack smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a wolf looking at a trapped rabbit. "I made a call for you, Troy," Jack said. Hope flared in Harlan's eyes. "You did? Thank God." "Thank you, Chief. Where am I going? Federal camp? Florida?" "No." Jack shook his head. "Since your crimes involved state-level homicide and federal racketeering, there was a jurisdictional dispute. I settled it. You're staying in Mississippi." Harlan's blood ran cold. "Where?" "You're going to Parchman, Troy. The Mississippi State Penitentiary. Parchman? The farm? The bloodiest prison in the South. A place where Hope went to die in the cotton fields." "No," Harlan whispered. "No, please. That's a hard time camp. It gets better." Jack leaned in closer. "I spoke to the warden this morning. Warden Robert Iron Blackwell." Harlan's knees buckled. Warden Blackwell was a myth, a terror. A man known for running the tightest, hardest ship in the penal system. "You know Blackwell," Harlan gasped. "We served together in Fallujah," Jack whispered, the truth landing like a sledgehammer. "He owes me a life debt. I called it in today." Harlan started to hyperventilate. "What? What did you ask him for?" "I asked him to make sure you were comfortable," Jack said, his eyes drilling into Harlan's soul. "I told him that you like to feel important. So he's putting you in Camp J, general population. But he promised me he'd give you a job." "A job?" "Yeah." Jack pointed to the scar on Harlan's neck. "Since you like tying people to poles so much, you're going to be on the fence line crew repairing the barbed wire in the August heat every single day for the rest of your natural life. And Troy," Jack added as the marshals tightened their grip on Harlan's arms, "I sent Blackwell the video. The one of you and me on the highway. He played it for the block this morning. The inmates are waiting for you. They're very excited to meet the tough guy who likes to pick on people who can't fight back." The color drained from Harlan's face so completely he looked like a corpse. The realization hit him. He wasn't just going to prison. He was going to hell. And the devil was waiting with a welcome mat. "No, no," Harlan screamed, a primal sound of terror that cut through the courtroom noise. "Bishop, don't let them take me. Kill me. Just kill me now." He thrashed, fighting the marshals, kicking and spitting. It took 4 men to subdue him. They dragged him out the side door, his boots scraping across the floor. The exact same sound his boots had made on the gravel of Highway 61. Only now he was on the other end of the leash. Jack watched him disappear. He felt a hand on his shoulder. It was District Attorney Ray Thompson, the man who had prosecuted the case. "That was cold, Jack," Thompson said quietly. "Did you really call Blackwell?" "I did," Jack said, turning to walk down the center aisle. "Is he really going to Camp J?" Jack stopped and looked at the American flag hanging behind the judge's bench. Blackwell told me that for a man like Harlan, isolation is a mercy. And he doesn't believe in mercy for men who poison children. Harlan is going to the fields. He's going to work the hoe and the shovel until his hands bleed side by side with the men he put there. Jack put his sunglasses on even though he was indoors. He wanted to be the king of Hollow Creek, Jack said. Now he's just another serf on the farm. Jack walked out of the double doors. The press was waiting. A wall of microphones and cameras flashed. Chief Bishop, is it over? Is Hollow Creek safe? A reporter from the Times-Picayune shouted. Jack stopped at the top of the marble steps. He looked out at the city. He took a deep breath of the air that was no longer tainted by the smell of corruption. The cancer is cut out, Jack said, his voice steady and projecting for the cameras. But the healing takes time. To the people of Hollow Creek, I promised you I would clean house. I just took out the trash. Now we rebuild. He walked down the steps to his waiting squad car. Officer Briggs, the one decent cop he had managed to salvage and retrain, was waiting by the door. Briggs opened the back door for him. "Good day in court, Chief," Briggs asked. Jack looked at the empty spot on his wrist where the handcuffs had once been. "The best, Briggs," Jack said. "The very best." As the car pulled away, merging into traffic, Jack pulled his phone out. He had one final notification. A text message from Warden Blackwell. It was a single photo. It showed a freshly made bunk in a cramped concrete cell. On the pillow was a printed screenshot of Troy Harlan's face from the viral video taped to the fabric, and next to it a single rusted pair of handcuffs. Under the photo, the caption read, "The welcome committee is ready." Jack Bishop deleted the message, leaned his head back against the seat. And for the first time in months, he closed his eyes and slept without dreaming of the pole. That, my friends, is the definition of the long game. Troy Harlan spent his life thinking power was about who could yell the loudest or hit the hardest. He didn't realize that real power is patience. He tied a man to a pole to feel big. And in the end, that same man held the keys to the smallest, darkest room in Mississippi. Jack Bishop didn't just get revenge, he got justice. And Harlan, he's probably out in the fields of Parchman right now, sweating under that same hot sun he used to torture innocent people. Never judge a book by its cover, especially when that book wears faded jeans and drives a beat-up old Malibu down a lonely stretch of Mississippi highway. In the story of Chief Jack Bishop and Sergeant Troy Bull Harlan, we witness a truth that cuts straight to the heart. Real power doesn't roar or flex its muscles in the sunlight. Real power moves quietly, patiently, and strikes only when the moment is perfectly right. Harlan thought dominance came from badges, batons, and the fear he could force into strangers' eyes. He believed he could humiliate, hurt, and control anyone who crossed his path because he wore the uniform and carried the gun. But Jack Bishop showed us something far deeper and more beautiful. True strength is born from restraint, intelligence, and an unshakable sense of justice. While tied to that scorching telephone pole, sweating under the merciless Delta sun, Bishop didn't break. He didn't beg. He simply waited, planned, and trusted that the long game always wins. That single choice, to endure instead of explode, turned the predator into prey and delivered justice not just for one man, but for an entire town poisoned by corruption and greed. It reminds us that every bully, every abuser of power, every person who thinks they're untouchable, eventually meets someone who refuses to play their game. The lesson is simple yet profound. Patience is the ultimate weapon, and karma has a long memory. Never underestimate the quiet stranger, the person who seems weak, or the one who chooses dignity over revenge in the moment. Because behind calm eyes and worn clothes can live a force strong enough to dismantle empires built on cruelty. What about you? Have you ever faced someone who thought they could break you, only to discover your own quiet strength later? Or witnessed true justice unfold in a way that gave you chills? Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one and love hearing how these lessons touch your life. If this story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next tale of karma in action. Together, let's keep reminding the world that good always finds a way. Thank you for watching. Stay strong and remember, the quiet ones often write the most powerful endings. Peace.